Check it out. So, remember when I was like, do y'all know why I like the Trident, right? Watch this. So, Mel had asked me, what did I think God looked like? And I had just seen, was Neil deGrasse Tyson on like a little short. And he was like, from what we understand, the what makes up the universe has the same properties as what we see in a black hole. And I was like, oh shit. So when she asked me, I kind of just like thought of a black hole, right? So I was like, all right. Well, actually, I did a little smiley face shit, but uh, just playing around and shit. But then, like, so you got the black hole and shit. Then, fucking, it's just not a black circle, right? You got an event horizon, right? So I just kind of like drew that as, you know what I'm saying, a white corona. Feel me? And then if you look in the book of Enoch and stuff, I was like looking at the description of the Ancient of Days, and it said his throne was like that of a circle of the sun. So I'm like, did Enoch, when he saw the Ancient of Days, and he said his hair is like white wool, right? So I'm like, oh shit, that looked like a goddamn fro, you know what I'm saying, with gray hair, or you know, just pure, just white shit, and like the circle was that of the sun, but he said like that of the sun. Now, if it was a black hole, did this nigga know what a black hole was and shit? Oh my bad, probably not. So what he saw was probably a black hole, and to get it into a concept that Enoch could understand with his with the amount of knowledge he had at the moment, there was probably a being on sitting on a black throne, like a black circle, and he probably had like white hair. But he says distinctively that the Son of Man has he's in the image of a man. So the ancient days might not look like a man, right? So, I'm just spitballing and guessing and shit. But anyway, so then I come across this video about like this ancient chicken lion snake god Abraxas, and it was this dude who had a vision, and he was like freaking out, and he wasn't particularly like religious or anything, but one thing he did know to ask when he was getting talked to this entity, right, was that do you believe in Jesus? And the entity was like, yes, Jesus was real, and he was the Son of God. And later on in the video, in his vision, what he saw, right, was a circular mass, in the distance. It was just bigger than life, huge as fuck, right? And it had this like white circle around it, and it was just pulsating with energy, not like a fire, but more like static or something, like electricity or something like that. And he was like, and all he could like think of was that this is the most terrifying yet understandable, orderly being. Like, this was the creator of the universe. And dude was shook. And I'm like, holy shit. That's exactly what, I came up with when she had asked me what did I think God looked like. And so, doing so, right, I'm like, you know what I'm saying? I took the concept a little further and shit. And so I'm like, okay, if this right here is the creator of the universe, right? Let's split that, right? So, what would you get, right? So I just, I'm not finna color all this shit in. This shit took too long first time. But that's black, right? Cool. This is white, right? So I was like, this is black and this is white when you split them. Then I was like, wait, there's something missing, right? So I'm like, oh. It's a fire, the energy and shit, right? So I'm like, okay, so how do I interpret this, right? Like, so now I'm thinking this is matter, right? And this is spirit. And I didn't know what to do with this at the moment, right? So I'm like, okay, so this is like, angels. Angels, they like appear from light and shit. God said, let there be light, right? So in the splitting, right, I'm like, boom, gotcha. So okay, now we got the universe. We got matter and we got light, photons, oscillation and shit. And I still didn't know what to do with this thing. So the reason why I came up with that, and then I was like, okay, so it seems that like God was dividing himself, right? Because this being, right, he said he felt an insurmountable amount of terror too. God is not like oblivious to what evil is, right? It's just that he knows that order and justice and all of that has to be, like, for any a house divided cannot stand. So if you let chaos reign, then it's gonna kill him. If he encompasses all of this shit, it's gonna kill him. So for him to be God, right, the creator and shit, then it's just he made the decision to split everything and put order over here, and I went chaos at first, but then I was like purpose. I can't spell. I don't even know if that is purpose, but so I'm like, all right, cool, right? But I'm a walk you through how I got to the conclusion, right? So we're gonna go chaos anyway, right? So light, in all intents and purposes, does not experience time. Another little short I looked at, right? From the moment it is created to the time that the only thing that can affect it is matter, right? So God had created this split right then and there. And so the angels were essentially the epitome of perfection, essentially, like the perfected form, right? But matter is what? It's shadow, in a sense, right? But what's greater? You feel me? So I was looking at like the Hebraic letters and shit, and so I was like I went like Aleph, Tav, and all of that, and I was like, Then I went based like even simpler, like what's the simplest structure? And I was like, oh, a triangle. It's the simplest stable structure, right? And so, okay, word. Fucking Egypt, Amun Ra, right? He said, out of the waters I arose on a pyramid. He was up here, right? I was like, if I was a being, right? Let me start. A point, similar to the black hole, right? Then how could you really know yourself, right? You would know what you look like because you'd be this entity right here. So in order to understand yourself, you would need another point to look at, to distinguish yourself as such. And then in that, it would just create three, right? Because that is like this one's looking at this one. Or maybe more so like imagine like this point, right? Being a whole eye. And this it's just like, because it just represents like awareness and consciousness. Well, what do you like? What is there to look at? You feel me? Like, so it's aware. So this is that, right? So in all intents and purposes, it's three eyes, right? And so to give depth perception, right? You need two eyes to create depth perception. So in the function of this, I'm sorry, I'm trying to draw and hold the camera at the same time. In this creation, right? This is where you get this eye. And so I'm like, okay, so this was the base level God, right? And then I was thinking, like, if I was God and I was to map out the universe before I decide to, set the ignition, right? Like essentially, like I'm trying to like recreate how I got to this conclusion, but like I'm gonna miss some shit because it's been a minute. But in all intents and purposes, it's like I was using symbols, and the symbols from like different religions and shit, and different like they were all like repeating. And if I went to like paleo shit, it was actually like these symbols lined up with like how we were constructed our understanding of the universe. And I was like, oh shit. So I was like, these people were connecting with a higher form of intelligence that was inputting the information that would give us an understanding of the universe for their respective time, right? And it just is. It's universal. So when I was so that's how I was just going and researching different symbols and shit and figuring out like what the fuck I could do with the shit. And that's basically all that was. But so I was looking at, then I was like, let me look at different religions and shit. So I'm looking at different religions. And I see Egyptology, right? The Book of Death. I'm looking at Norse mythology. I'm looking at Babylonian shit. And eventually the last one I got to was Hinduism. But I was like, oh shit. Fucking the world tree in was it Norse? It's called Yggdrasil. Doesn't that sound like Israel? You feel me? So I'm like, oh shit. And then like Tesla was like the secret to Universe 369. So I was like, okay. And then I saw the cross, and I was like, why it's 4 intersecting lines, right? So I'm like, okay. I used the cross. I was like, all right, boom. Boom. Right? And then I'm like, all of this information, all this data and shit, before the creation of the universe was happening inside of this. This is before it popped off and did all this shit, right? It was happening inside of it, right? And so I'm like, oh shit. So what if, like, God had then, before like every like plan was fleshed out, he made he accounted for what he was not, right? So I'm like, boom. But then I'm like, boom. Right? Because there's no like space. I mean, there's no like direction, right? So the only perceivable concept of like difference in its simplest form would be just like inversion, right? So then I was like, okay. And so then I was so I'm like, okay, if the conception of awareness was happening, right? It could have happened maybe 4 ways, right? But one of those 4 ways is essentially inert, right? Like it just does not. It stays in a weird state, and I was like, okay, so this is like hell, right? This is consciousness. This is manipulation. It's like, okay, so like, well, I'll get to that, right? And then this is blind, right? And so in Greek mythology, right, you have what's his name? It's 2 gods, I forgot. Prometheus, right? That's forethought. And then you have, I think it's Epimetheus. That's afterthought, right? So in my mind, right, it's, oh shit, I just came to a different Anyway, so I'm like going to science, right? Like I'm all over the place. I got ADHD, right? So you have what? Matter. You have antimatter. W or some shit. And then you have but then like science, there's not enough like math and gravity to understand why the universe sticks with itself, right? It's like, how the fuck does that happen, right? So they come up with the concept of dark energy and shit. And dark matter, right? So in my interpretation, right, like all of these possibilities are equally existent, but only one can be true, right? And one is just death, right? So in my mind, right, I'm like, okay, so this is let me classify this shit as positive matter, and let me classify this shit as antimatter. And in Norse mythology, like was it, I think Odin fought his brothers. So it's V, Vili, and Vi, right? He fought his brothers, and he was the one, coming out on top, right? So what? There was a cow, right? The symbol for Aleph. Isn't that interesting? The inert. Well, Aleph is this, but that's Paleo Hebrew, right? So the inert one. Boom. They were fed off of this, right? And so antimatter and matter collided, right? This destroyed everything, right? But they were like, why is the universe mostly matter? And so I'm like, because this one right here exists. You feel me? So this, it's almost like in the colliding of all of this is order, right? And you can, swap them however the fuck you want. But this is order. This is basically possibility. This is blind, so it's chaos, right? This is just sustainment. So after all that collides, one of these type versions of how God could have basically started the universe reigns supreme. And this is how we get the Most High God, right? So I had to I came to the conclusion that like we live in a supremely hyper quantumly intelligent super being, right? And so what he does is he basically calculates all possibilities, sets forth a real a real universe for that to exist in, and those things that are caught in his, made in his image, right, God's, right, they are running the calculations for him. So in essence, like, boom, 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 everything happens. You get the cross. Then if you like fold the cross, like you make it into little squares and shit, it makes the little Hebrew symbol, like the little whatever. But it also can make the, what is it? The little tesseract, the hyperdimensional cube or whatever, cube within a cube. It all forms the same shit. So this is why one had to reign supreme, right? So then you get order. This entity decided to go with this one. Yet energy cannot be destroyed. So what he did was he took over the three other versions, and what it turned out to be was like there is no fourth, because it just ends up as death. If you're going to create, you have to be life. You can't just it just wouldn't work. So that's essentially the concept of Sheol or hell. Shit that just won't work, right? But God is not just his order. He's essentially all of these things. What he's doing is he's reconstituting himself to make himself better through experiences, but he's also protecting freedom of people. And that means freedom to do bad things and shit, but also establishing that order. So when you run this down, right, I'm like, okay, shoot, fucking, you got all of that transpired in this being, then the split happened, right? So in this whole thing, when antimatter and dark matter, antimatter and matter collided, right? I hope y'all can keep up, right? They essentially, canceled each other out. What did that shit turn into? Obviously, science is trying to figure out what the fuck dark matter and dark energy is, right? It's a form of something that we can't like figure out. We can't like calculate it. We can hardly measure it. We just know the shit's there, right? So boom, the split happens, right? Okay, cool. So now you got, let me just call it B, and I'm gonna just call it W, right? So now you got black and white, right? So this is matter, this is light, right? Just like up here. But if you're gonna get light, right? If you're gonna get order, light has to emanate from something, right? Like there's molecules that are in a sun that then, what is it, fission? I think the sun is fission or whatever. Or is it fusion? I don't know. Fuck it. No, I think it's fission. I don't know. Y'all can figure that shit out. So light has to emanate from matter. Okay. So there's always a like a communication. Like as far as these two parallel things could get, there's always a line of communication, right? And why did God create order? Right? And keep matter over here. Does that make sense? Well, there's a whole nother like side of reality that we're not privy to be honest with you. But it's because the order had to be birthed from the chaos, right? So I'm like, all right, that makes sense. So now let's do that communication. I was like, okay, let's do this. right? I made them into like 3 lines, like, and I was like, I just made them look like wave functions, like, and to me it was just like lightning and shit, right? So, I was looking up like, when I was, fighting these warlocks, wizards and shit. The like why dark magicians wear like a whole lot of black and shit. It's because black is magnetic, right? Because it's like concepts relate to actual 3D functions, but they're not direct parallels. But that's because it there's a whole bunch of goddamn steps before the concept gets manifested. By that point, it's like it's not going to be a direct 1-for-1 and shit. So, but the concept of black is magnetic. The concept of white is electric, because black is, for all intents and purposes, you can go like it's the absence of, and then of light, and light is the absence of dark, of nothing, right? So electric. So I'm like, oh shit, and then there's communication, right? And then that like, that's like electromagnetic energy, right? Like that's the communication, right? And so I'm like, oh shit, that's dope as fuck. I hope I got enough battery and shit. Hello.